Every city skyline tells a story of ambition, of engineering, of money. But what about the stories that aren't there? Today, we're going to talk about the ghosts of the skyline, these incredible ghost spires that were designed down to the last bolt, but for one reason or another never actually got built. They're these tantalizing glimpses of a world that could have been. Okay, so check these out. On the left, all the way from 1908, you've got Antoni Gaudi's hotel attraction. It's this wild, mountain-shaped tower that he designed for New York City. And on the right, that's Frank Lloyd Wright's 1956 vision for Chicago, a needle-thin, mile-high skyscraper he called the Illinois. I mean, these were just buildings, right? They were these radical, world-changing statements from two of the biggest legends in architecture ever. So, they were brilliant. They were super ambitious, and they had detailed plans ready to go. So why are they just drawings sitting in an archive somewhere? What's the deal? What actually stops an architectural dream from becoming a reality of concrete and steel? Well, that's the big question we're digging into. To figure out why these buildings never happened, we first have to get inside the heads of the people who dreamed them up. This is all about the big ideas that drove these architects to try and build the impossible. Now, what's fascinating here is that while Gaudi and Wright's styles looked totally different on the surface, their core philosophy was basically the same. They both believed that nature was the ultimate architect. Gaudi saw perfect structures in things like tree trunks and human skeletons. Wright had his ideas of tenuity and continuity, fancy words for making buildings that grew right out of the earth like a plant, right and strong. So let's zoom in on Gaudi's vision for a sec. At 360 meters, the hotel attraction would have absolutely dwarfed everything in 1908 Manhattan. And this wasn't just a hotel. It was going to be this massive cultural hub with exhibition halls, a theater, and 5 huge dining rooms, each one themed for a different continent. It was basically a monument to global unity, all wrapped up in this beautiful, weird, organic shape. So why did it die? You might think it was physics or money, but nope, it was philosophy. The story goes that the American developers wanted this hotel to be a playground exclusively for the city's super-rich elite. Gaudi, who had really strong socialist beliefs, was apparently disgusted by this. He thought culture should be for everybody. So, when their visions clashed, he just walked away. It was a stand-on principle, really. Okay, so if you thought Gaudi's tower was ambitious, hold on. Let's talk about Frank Lloyd Wright. In 1956, he drops this design for the Illinois. And this wasn't just a skyscraper, people. It was a vertical city, a mile high, 528 floors. It was designed to house 100,000 people and 15,000 cars. His idea was that it would be so massive it would make other skyscrapers unnecessary, freeing up all this green space on the ground. So you're probably asking, how on earth was that even possible? The secret was this idea Wright called the taproot system, and it perfectly shows his whole nature-inspired thing. He pictured this massive central core, like the trunk of a giant tree, sunk way deep into the ground. Then, the floors would just branch out from that core, cantilevered out, creating a building that was unbelievably strong but also felt light and open. But here's the thing, a beautiful vision and a clever design. That only gets you so far. When you decide to build that tall, you're basically declaring war on the fundamental forces of nature. And that brings us to the brutal reality of the physical challenges these projects face. Yeah, building tall has some serious enemies. First, just plain old gravity, the building's own insane weight trying to crush itself. Then you've got wind, which gets way, way stronger the higher up you go. And it doesn't just push, it creates these dangerous vibrations. And finally, there's the slow, constant stress on the materials themselves, which can actually cause concrete to creep and shrink over decades. All right, let's zoom in on one of those enemies, because it's a wild one, vortex shedding. It sounds complicated, but just picture wind hitting the corner of a building. It creates these little whirlpools of air, or vortices, on alternating sides. On a giant skyscraper, those vortices create this rhythmic push-pull that can make the whole building start to sway back and forth like a guitar string. And if you don't control it, it's literally catastrophic. So what are our weapons in this war against physics? Advanced materials, of course. On one side, you have high-strength concrete. It's amazing at resisting being crushed, and it's naturally good at dampening vibrations. On the other side, you've got high-strength steel. It's lighter, and it can bend without breaking, which is absolutely crucial for dealing with things like wind and earthquakes. The biggest towers today use a smart combination of both. But okay, let's say you solve all the physics problems. There's another monster lurking in the wings, ready to bring a project to its knees. Economics. And to see how that happens, we need to look at a more modern tragedy, a ghost spire from our own time. And this was the Chicago Spire. It was designed by the famous architect Santiago Calatrava, and it was just this breathtaking 2,000-foot twisting drill bit of a tower that would have completely changed the city's skyline. And the crazy part? They actually broke ground in 2007. This thing was really happening. But then, look at the timeline. Construction kicks off in 2007. Just 1 year later, boom, the 2008 global financial crisis hits. The credit markets completely freeze up, construction grinds to a halt, the project's main bank almost goes under, and just like that, the dream starts to die. And this number right here, this was the final nail in the coffin, a $77 million foreclosure lawsuit in 2010. The money was just gone. For years, all that was left on that site was a 76-foot deep hole in the ground, a real physical scar on the city, and a pretty powerful warning about how global finance can build up or tear down our world. So, we've seen these giants fall for all kinds of reasons. Philosophy, physics, finance. It's really easy to just look at these projects and write them off as expensive failures. But is that the whole story? So, what's the final verdict here? Are they just monuments to what might have been? Just expensive holes in the ground? Or is there something more to their story? Something valuable that we can find even in the failure? Well, think about it like this. This is the famous Tribune Tower in Chicago. It was the winner of this huge architectural competition way back in 1922. But to get this one winner, the judges had to look through more than 250 other designs. That means for every single success story, there were over 250 failures. And that is the key takeaway here. These unbuilt projects, they aren't failures. They're more like laboratories. They're the places where architects get to test out their most radical ideas, completely free from the real-world limits of budgets and building codes. They forced engineers to dream up new materials and new ways of building. The ideas that are born in these so-called failures often sneak their way into the buildings that do get built, sometimes years or even decades later. So yeah, we'll never get to stand at the base of these towers and look up. But their DNA, their ideas, are all around us. The lessons we learned from Gaudi's organic shapes, from Wright's taproot system, and even from the financial mess of the Spire, all of that informs how we design and build today. These ghosts are quietly haunting and shaping the world we actually live in. And in the end, maybe that's the real lesson, and it's something Gaudi himself said perfectly. These architects weren't just inventing buildings out of thin air. They were trying to understand and translate the principles that are already written in nature. And even when they failed, just the act of trying to read that book is what pushed all of architecture forward.